if I can find it.
All right.
And let's see, how do I slideshow? Here we go. I think we got it. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, okay. I'm going to try really hard not to accidentally hit the mouse like I was doing last week, but we'll see how that goes. At least I know how to turn it back now. So thanks for joining us for Free Salad, and we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the herbs that are starting to grow right now that you can use for nutrition and for first aid. And the handouts that you got and the slides that you have available are way more than what we're going to talk about in the short time today. But I wanted you to have all the information so that you can have the resources and the references and just be able to go back and look at the words and then find the picture in the slideshow and have that information. And just to ask you to, if you're going to share any of the handouts or pictures with anybody, that be mindful about sharing. There's a lot of hours of time going into this information that I'm sharing with you, so I gladly share it and hope that you will be mindful if you share it along. Okay, this I don't know why this keeps wanting to start from the end, but here we go. So first thing we would need to talk about is how to do this in the right way. All of my herbal teachers really stress, and we work with the plants because, and we treat them as individual entities. They're alive. It's important that you remember that they're giving their lives or parts of themselves to help you sustain your vitality. And you need to honor that contribution. It's very, very important to get in the right space if you're going to do wild foraging, or even when you're in your own garden and you're going to be harvesting your food for yourself. We really work to make sure that we're connected with that greater spirit of energy, and also get into a place of gratitude that you have this free gift, this partner in your house, and you want to be respectful of your harvest and take only what's needed. Some plants, if you take a whole patch, like we're going to talk about here shortly, it won't grow back. So you have to learn how to harvest properly and respectfully. You want to ask permission and try and listen with all the parts of you that listen, not just your ears, to see if you get a sense that it's okay for you to take that herb, that bark, that root. I like to think about it, if someone had really nice hair and you walked up and said, I really like your hair, and then you reached out and cut a clump of it off without asking if you could do that. That's the same thing that happens when we're just going up and tearing leaves off things or picking fruit off. You want to make sure that you're connecting. Lots of times people will do some sort of ritual, like offer tobacco in some indigenous cultures. That's a big one that we use. Whatever's comfortable for you. You just need to say thank you. Sometimes if it's a really dry season, what I'll do is just bring extra water and then add a little water to the area where I'm harvesting to help keep things living. You want to make sure that you learn as much as you can about the plants before you use them. And I was taught that you need to use at least 3 sources of word references and 3 sources of picture references, not necessarily the 3, so like just 3 books, but really pull from all the resources that you have to make sure you're gathering what you think you are. And the ones we're going to talk about today are really, really easy to identify, really easy to get to know, and so they're very safe to go out and seek and play with. So other safety considerations to think about is, how far from the road is it? What is upstream? I mean, there's lots of places in in the world today that are toxic, that have been contaminated, that we might not even know about yet. And we need to just kind of get an idea of the area that you're going to be picking in. I just had a conversation with a client not too long ago who's been using that first herb that popped up before the introduction called horsetail. And that herb is actually used to help with your bones and your connective tissue and your cartilage. And she has been able to change her osteopenia, osteoporosis status by drinking horsetail tea. Last year, she collected some horsetail from a place that she hadn't before, and it didn't taste right to her. She asked me some questions. She said, "I've been using this horsetail, and it tastes, it's strong, it tastes weird." And then she found out that there was some recent new sheep farming, and that there was some flood water thing happening nearby, and that perhaps that horsetail got contaminated by something. So we decided that we'd be good for her to stop using that and got her some different stuff. So those are the kinds of things you want to pay attention to. There are some plants that do grow in places that need to be detoxed. They have a specialty to be able to help clean the water or clean the ground. And some of those plants can clean the ground and disperse it, and the plants are still safe to use. And some uptake that, and you don't want to use those plants. And you'll know that as you get to know how they're growing and why they might be there, and paying attention to the area that you're picking in. That being said, that these same plants, like Creeping Charlie, grow in places that are very safe and clean to eat, because they grow to cover up bare spots. Mother Nature really likes to have everything covered. And so if there's an open area of dirt, a lot of these kinds of herbs will grow to keep things from eroding. And like that drier condition, a lot of times that kind of open ground will be dry. So you'll find some of these plants we're going to talk about that make great salad herbs growing in places like that, and they're perfectly safe to eat. But it's just important to know the area. In herbalism, we look at the spectrum of herbs when we're using them. Lots of the time, these herbs, especially the ones we're going to talk about today, are more like a food source, food as medicine. And there's sort of a bell curve where you have something that is really just more of a nutritional herb. But oftentimes that kind of goes into the middle ground where those nutritional herbs can also be used as a medicine. And you might not use them as a big bulk food item, but you would make more smaller quantities or use them in different ways than just throwing them into a salad bowl. And then there are some herbs that go all the way to poison that can be very toxic to people if you don't know how to use them. But knowledgeable practitioners often will use more toxic plants in certain ways to help people with more critical health conditions. Again, that's why we need to be careful with learning who we're picking. Luckily, we don't have too many poisonous or toxic, highly toxic herbs and plants growing in our woodlands around us. There's only a few that you have to be careful of, and that would be another class that would be a good one to have in the future. Homeopathic remedies are a way that some of these toxic substances are used as medicine. There's a lot of differences between herbalism and homeopathy. But it's also a very good way to use some of these stronger plants in a way that's very safe for people. So let's get started talking about some ways that this could apply. So Echinacea, if you've seen purple coneflower in your garden, you might have noticed it's very, very prickly. The top center cone part there is really hard. It's like a pine cone almost, and very bristly, like a brush. And the leaves have a toughness, and they're prickly, and it's a pretty bitter plant. So again, as a food source, you wouldn't necessarily make a whole salad out of this, but making it into a cup of tea to help you with your digestion, to boost up your immune system, it's a good way that you can use this plant. You can save it and dry the leaves for the winter time, so you have some medicine if you start to feel a little off or your stomach's upset. You can have a cup of echinacea tea, and that's a really easy way to play around with a pretty common plant that's easy to find. Basswood is one of the things that you're going to start to look for. Really early in the season, the linden flower trees are starting to grow. Looking for my notes here. So basswood in our town, you will see a lot of times they're boulevard plants. They're great big trees when they grow all the way up. So sometimes it's hard to think, how am I going to get to these tasty leaves and these medicinal flowers? But most of the time, if they haven't been pruned, like along the side of the road, like they often are, around the bottom of those big giant trees, there's going to be these little shoots that are coming out with these very shiny, see these shiny, lovely little leaves up here in the corner? Those are the ones that you want to eat. They are so tasty. They taste like leaf lettuce. They're super thin and delicate, but you can get, they're big. They're probably, they grow about the size of, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches. And so they make a nice bulk, a nice base for a salad. When they get to this other stage of growth, when they grow a little more, they get sort of dried out looking. They lose that shininess. And these leaves you could still eat, but they're not as tasty. They get tough. These stage of leaves works good for things like if you wanted to make dolmas or steamed wraps, leaf wraps. It's oftentimes it's used instead of like a grape leaf. So that's another way you can still use them. But when they're shiny and little and young and fresh, it's one of the earliest salad greens that you can see. They're really tasty. This bottom here, I have to move my picture over. See down here where the end of the branch comes and you see these sort of lighter colored, they almost look white. They're kind of a cream color. They're a real light green. And then down here, these are the little flowers. And this part, this little tip end of the branch is what we collect in dry for the winter time, and it's called Linden Flower tea. And it's really medicinal in a very gentle way that's good for kids. It's good for elders. It's a very mild tea. It helps with a sense of calmness. It's soothing. It's not a tea that's going to make you sleepy, but it just takes the edge off. And boy, can we use that nowadays. Um, it's mildly astringent and a little bit mucilaginous, so it helps to soothe tissues, and it's used when people have irritated lungs from like colds and coughs and things like that. It's got some volatile oils that can help with antimicrobial aspects, so it's a good one to have on hand. It's real easy to dry, and it's kind of light and fluffy. This there's lots more information about each one of these herbs in your handout. I'm just picking out some highlights here. In France, this is like a tea that's in every kitchen. And it would be something that you would get offered, like when someone comes over and you offer them a cup of coffee here. It's one of their main drinks. They call it Telou. And it's just a very nice, safe, and gentle one that's fun to find and experiment with. The other thing that you want to start looking for right away are wild leeks. And as you're driving down the road and starting to look off to the sides into the woods and small wooded lots and things as you're walking, you're going to start to see these patches, these green patches that you can't mistake because they're one of the only things growing out in the woods right now. And they're really easy to spot. And if you get a closer look, you'll see that they're growing in these two little pairs of ears, kind of like bunny ears, and these are the leaves of the ramps. And if you are interested in harvesting them, what you want to do is get a really small, sharp shovel, and you need to dig straight down next to the, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do, down here, and go probably, you want to push hard, and these sometimes will grow like between roots and rocks and sticks and things, so sometimes you have to move your shovel around a lot to get there, and just go straight down probably 4 to 6 inches and work your way around so you've got a little clump, and then kind of get in there with your hands and wiggle them apart. These guys grow in this whole patch here on the right hand side. That's like a colony. So underneath the ground, all of those individual little plants are connected. Their roots are all tangled up like this. And they look like, once you pull them out, if you've seen green onions in the grocery store with the little tendrily roots, they're like that. And so you have to be kind of diligent with getting down around the bottom of the bulb and pulling, or you'll bust it off and the bulb will stay in the ground. But they're really tasty and fun, and you can dry them and you can put them in vinegar, and some people freeze them and make pesto out of the leaves. Very versatile. Lots of people would just use the leaves and not even mess around with digging up the bulbs. And that's another way you can do it. And it can be a lot easier. And some people feel it's more sustainable. I think the thing to remember in terms of sustainability when you're picking ramps is that wouldn't want to take this big whole patch out because it won't grow back. This is one that you want to take just a little bit from here and then go way back over and take a little bit from the other patch over there. And they're very abundant. When they find a place that they like to grow, you can work your way through a section of woods and get plenty of wild onions for yourself. Let's talk about the vitamins that they have. All kinds of trace minerals, vitamin K, copper, iron, folate, vitamin A, C, B6, calcium, vitamin E. They've got some omega-3s. They have similar compounds, sulfur compounds, like all the other members of the onion family do. And so they're really good for your cardiovascular system and helping you to detox. The other thing, as you're out looking for your wild ramps that you're going to find growing really close by, are the fiddlehead ferns. Ostrich ferns are what we're looking for here. Ostrich ferns have some look-alike cousins that you want to be careful that you don't confuse. So we're going to talk some details here that are really important to pay attention to when you're looking for the fiddleheads. And the first one being, do you see the center picture there with the little paper wrapper? This is the important feature to think about when you're looking for the babies. The other ferns that are not as body friendly to us, that can make you kind of sick to your stomach and maybe even a little more ill, will have a fuzzy white wrapper instead of a paper wrapper. So you want to look for this brown crinkly paper. The other thing you want to look for is this groove in the stem. Ostrich fern stems have a groove like celery. And the ones that they're commonly confused with that are similar in size and proportion are called interrupted ferns. That's one. They do not have a groove. They have a very round stem and then that brown fuzzy cover. So what we're looking for is this paper wrapper, a grooved stem, and then a cluster as they grow. They grow in what's called a rosette. You can kind of see the base of it here. And then they grow in these clumps. And there's usually between 5 to 9 shoots coming up in that clump. And then the brown part that you see right here, this is the seed frond from last year. And that grows separately in this little group. Once the ferns get to be this tall, of course, you're not going to want to eat them. But you can pick them all the way till they're like you might be able to get by with this one over here. That's getting a little bit too big. You can see up here this handful that this person has gathered. You can pick the stem a little longer than that. Think about like about 4 inches. And you pick them a lot like asparagus. If you've ever picked asparagus or break the tough end off when you're cooking it, you kind of just bend it a little and run your finger up and it'll snap right where it's supposed to break. And that's an easy way to gather them. There is tons of nutrition in ostrich ferns. They have a huge amount of vitamin A, of carotenes. They've got so much B3 that they're doing research in some cancer therapies and things surrounding some of the omegas and the different nutrition that they have in them. They have a bunch of potassium, which is really nice for us, and other trace minerals. So it's a really nutritional, fun thing to forage. And then back into the yard for something that everybody can be doing on a daily basis. I can't say enough about dandelions. Dandelions have so much nutrition. The leaves, the roots, they have amazing amounts of trace minerals, calcium, and phosphorus, and magnesium, and they've got D's and C's and B's, and just they're just loaded. So eating the greens in your salads, getting the root and putting it into your soups, into your stir fries, fresh, drying it, chopping it up small. This is root chopped up probably about the size of, a quarter of an inch or smaller than this right here. Like chop that sliced section again into smaller bits. And then dry it in the oven on a rack. You can look up ways to dehydrate things. It's real easy. And then some people will roast it. It gives it a more full, rich flavor. And there's just many, many ways to incorporate dandelion into your life that will help your nutrition and help your liver so it can function and detox the way it's supposed to. And it's very, very helpful. And I saw a comment that I didn't quite catch. I think it was from Roxanne, talking about how they blanch them, and they're just so good. They're so good, stir fried, blanched, mixed with mushrooms as a tasty side. Yeah, really yummy. Thanks, Roxanne. Here we have burdock. People have kind of a love-hate relationship with burdock. Especially if you don't want it growing in your yard. It can be kind of a nuisance because it grows really well. It grows very large, and if you have animals or fuzzy clothes on, you get to know burdock very well in the fall because it likes to walk with you. The burrs are very sticky. What the part that we use in cooking is the root, and it's used in Asian cooking, and it's called gobo. And you can find it in commerce. You can get it at the co-op oftentimes over by where the ginger and the other root kinds of vegetables are, and it'll be in a long package. And it does. It looks like a very large dandelion root. And burdock roots can be huge, 2 to 3 inches in diameter and as long as your arm, and they dig down deep. But you don't necessarily have to go for that big giant root. The big ones are often a little already kind of decaying in the middle. So you can use the smaller rootlets and they're much easier to dig. But this is one that's gonna give you a nice workout as you're digging. The Roots can be used any way that you can think of that you would use a carrot or a parsnip or your dandelion roots. You can cut them up, you can eat them fresh, you can put them in stir fries, you can put them in soup, you can grate them and use them, as a topping, mix them with horseradish, lots of different ways you can incorporate them fresh. I use a lot of burdock in the wintertime in tea form, in tea blends. Burdock helps our liver assimilate and break down and use the fats that we put in our bodies, which is really important to keep our skin and our nervous system healthy and intact. Oftentimes, when we're not assimilating our fats and breaking them down, and that gets backed up in our bodies and causes all kinds of other imbalances, we'll put burdock on board, and it can help to just kind of get that fire going and get those oils out to where they need to go to be used. The leaves and the seed tops are actually used in other ways, more in Chinese medicine than Western herbalism. The leaves are used often as a poultice for irritated skin. And because of that, when you are digging them, they actually can irritate your skin. Burdock could be helpful for diabetes in the fact that it would help that foundational metabolism get more efficient. And for something like diabetes, Roxanne, we could look at that more closely. That would, that would be worth a little bit deeper individual conversation. So contact me if you're interested. Burdock is one that we put on board when people are having trouble with digestion and with skin and with different nervous system issues. So lots of good reasons to put that into your foraging. Stinging nettle is another one that's growing right now. We're at the baby stage, so if you're out looking for nettles, you're going to find them real close to the ground here. They're still only just maybe a couple of inches if you've got a really warm microclimate somewhere that you know of. Stinging nettles is one of the most useful nutritional plants. It's got the highest bioavailable plant protein of any herb out there. It's helps with, it's called an adaptogen. So an adaptogen is a category of herbs that kind of just helps all of your systems, just broad spectrum. They're broad, they're mild, they help rebalance things that are out of balance just throughout your whole body. So it's good for your immune system, it's good for your digestion. We use stinging nettles to help treat allergies. We use them for nutrition. Stinging nettles is a great nutritional herb, and it's good for women who are nursing. It's great for people that need more energy. I use nettle to help people with urinary tract disorders, some prostate related things. It covers a lot of bases. When it's a little tiny baby like this, you can actually eat that fresh and it's not stingy and it's not irritating. But try some first because some people are hypersensitive and you want to make sure that if you're going to eat some nettles that you try a couple first and that it's not going to bother your throat. If it does, then you need to look to teas, infusions, macerating them up in a blender that can help. And lots of people will make fresh stinging nettle soup in the springtime. It's so bright green. It's amazing. The sting part is caused by something called formic acid. And formic acid actually starts to break down in the plant once you've picked it. And after about 20 minutes or a half an hour, the plant does not sting anymore. That component has broken down and it's not there anymore in the same way. And at that point, the plant actually becomes its own cure. So if you're out harvesting and you get more stung than you want to, You can take some of the stuff that you've harvested and wait for about 20 minutes and then rub it and mush it up and put it on the part where it got stung, and it will actually soothe that skin and make it better. We capture that stinging part to help more specifically with seasonal allergies or respiratory allergies. It works on the protein chain that causes the histamine reaction. So if you are picking that plant for that reason, you want to make sure that you get it into your whatever you're going to infuse it into right away before that sting stops. And you can also take that plant and put it in the freezer fresh while it's still stinging. And later on, when it's frozen, you can take it out and it will still sting you on the way out of the bag as well. It's a good way to capture that. That being said, if it will help you with all of those things, even if you're not getting the plant at that stage of the game because of all those other wonderful nutritional properties. And you can make tea out of the fresh herb, and then you can also dry it so you have lots for the winter. Okay, here we have lamb's quarters. So lamb's quarters is another one that you're often going to find like in your own garden. We have a few different varieties of lamb's quarters in our area. There's many different cousins, and they're all edible. Oftentimes people will confuse baby lamb's quarters with when their beets are coming up, and you're not quite sure. The difference is in the leaf structure of the beet is two little guys coming out of the ground, and the lamb's quarters will look more like this circular pattern of the leaves sticking out and opposing leaves. These are tasty as little babies. This is a really great salad herb. It tastes a lot like Swiss chard. These leaves here, this is a great stage to pick them when they're nice and bright green. They're kind of a thin leaf. They don't put a lot of bulk into your salad, but they have a nice salty kind of flavor. And if you find a couple plants that you can keep growing in your yard, in your garden, and you just keep picking them and trimming them back, they'll sort of bush out and you'll just have these little clumps of like salad leaves you can pick through the whole season. As it goes into the later summer, it will turn this kind of grayish color. And it's actually like this powdery texture that becomes part of the plant. And a lot of people think that that means that it's got like leaf mold on it, like sometimes we get on our plants in the summer when it gets hot and humid, but it's actually not. It's actually something the plant does itself, and it's a natural pesticide that keeps the bugs that like to eat this plant as much as we do from chewing on them. You can eat the leaves when they have that powdery texture, but a lot of people find that that's not as appealing to them. If you keep picking your plant back, it takes longer for it to get to this stage, and you'll have a longer time where you can be using it in your salads. Once the lamb's quarter gets more towards the end of its time where you're wanting to eat it, then your amaranth will be growing. Another common garden weed. Lots of people pull this out without understanding that this is like free spinach. It's both of these plants with that red stem that you might have noticed on the lamb's quarters and then the amaranth mean that both of these plants are really high in iron. They're really got a lot of, again, like minerals that a lot of dark leafies have in them, and more than even spinach and collard greens and things like that. So they're really high in minerals and lots of vitamins. Amaranth has a thicker leaf than lamb's quarter. It's more sturdy, and it does taste more like spinach than chard. So there's a little flavor difference there. You can mix them together because they will be at some point in time in the season growing at the same time, so you can have them both. Once they get to where they're starting to get this seed head on it, then these leaves, they get pretty tough. And at that point, that's when you want to start looking at maybe steaming them, chiffonade them and steam them up with um, some onions and garlic and maybe some mushrooms, and it makes a really tasty side dish that way. And when you steam your dark leafy greens, you actually make them a little more bioavailable to your digestion. All dark leafy greens have something called oxalic acid in them, and that can inhibit calcium absorption to a certain degree, particularly for people that have trouble with that to begin with. So if you think you might be on the fence there, have some bone density issues, you might want to look to steaming your greens instead of eating massive amounts of them fresh. Chickweed is another herb that's going to start to grow in this early season and into the early part of summer. Chickweed likes to grow in kind of more shady than not shady. It is very tender and juicy and succulent. It has a lot of juiciness and mucilaginous that makes it just really refreshing. It's you might look for it along the edges of your foundation on the shady side of your house or under the edge of your deck where it's a little bit more shady and stays kind of damp. It's a very small leafed plant. The leaves up here that I'm showing as a close-up are really tiny, just like this plant down here by this person's finger, and they grow kind of in a mass. So from that little clump where it's rooted, this big mass over here on the left will just grow and kind of string out along the edge. And it's really easy to uproot. You have to be a little careful. This one's a good one to harvest with scissors so that you don't accidentally just yank the whole big growth right out of the ground. It kind of grows out from there and just spreads. The flowers are really beautiful. You want to pick your chickweed before it flowers and give it a good haircut and then let it flower. And once the flowers have gone to seed, then you can pick it again. And it's a self-seeding annual, so it'll just keep regrowing. And this one has, again, so much vitamin C. It's got lots of calcium. It's got some potassium. It's got some magnesium. It's got some trace minerals, so it's got some nice nutrition, but it's also it's just so cooling and fresh. It's great in salads. It just gives that nice light, uplifting crunch. It's got, because of its mucilaginous properties, people will blend this up and use it as a thickener in smoothies. And we use that same property to soothe skin issues. So it's good for eczema, for scrapes, for sunburn, for dry skin. A lot of herbal, natural skin remedies will have chickweed as a base herb in them for soothing. So really nice one. Right, we're getting kind of close to the end here. I'm going to skip purslane. Read about this one because it's so tasty. If you like cucumbers and lemon and crunchy, you need to find this in your dry spots and put it in your salads if you can wait that long, because you might want to just eat it right out of the ground. Because I want to show you about a couple of first aid plants. This is plantain. And plantain grows everywhere that man has set foot. We call it white man's footprint, actually, and it grows where the ground has been compressed, packed down, barren. You'll see it growing in the hard places. Plantain's really common in backyards, along sidewalks and things. So one of the issues with this one is to make sure what's downstream or upstream from it. I mean, because this one, it will grow in places where people walk their dogs or things like that, or on the cracks in the driveway. You can find it in your yard most of the time. And see these long, this is the vein here, these are fibers in the leaf. And if you break the stem right here, just kind of half break it and then just stretch it a little, it's stretchy. And that's one way that you can identify it. But it grows close to the ground and flat, and it's really easy to identify. The reason that we use plantain is because of the way that it grows, and it has to really work hard to draw its energy out of the earth. And that the Doctorate of Signatures tells us then that's how it helps us. So this is the herbal drawing agent. And so you can pick a leaf and chew it up and stick it on a mosquito bite or a bee sting or a pussy wound or anything that needs something pulled out. And this plant does that. It's just fail safe. It's super easy to use. You can put it on a toothache. You can use it. You can make an infusion and use it for skincare if you have acne. It's I make a tincture of it and I mix it with some other things and I call it itch away spray, and it's great for mosquito bites um, in the height of summer. That one moves a lot during the summertime. It's very safe and effective. It's a wound healer. That stretchiness and the goopiness that happens when you chew the leaves up and or cut the leaves up and use them helps to heal scrapes and bruises and cuts and burns. And it's one that we teach all the little people because it's an easy one to find and use. And who doesn't need another remedy for getting rid of mosquito bites in this area? Yarrow is another medicinal plant that we use for wound healing. Right now, yarrow, if you go out and look for it, it's already here in this little baby stage coming up. One of its nicknames is called squirrel tail because this will curl over and it looks just like the tail of a squirrel when they're running. It grows to be about 2 feet tall, and the whole top of the plant is used. So you can use the leaves and the flowers. And yarrow is used for cuts. It's a blood specialist. Internally, we use it for moving blood or holding blood. It kind of has this innate ability to know what it's supposed to do. So if someone's bleeding too much, it helps to stop bleeding. And if someone's not bleeding enough, it helps to boost the blood. So it's a cardiovascular herb that we use. We use it for female cycle balancing, and it's an astringent, so it works for different kinds of cold remedies. We use it sometimes for that. But topically, it's extraordinary for wound healing. And it's antimicrobial and it has some analgesic properties. So if you put it on, it actually helps to decrease pain too. So this one is a really handy one, especially if you're out hiking and walking a lot. And it's 1:45. So let me see what we got here. Do we have any questions? All of these pictures and all this information and about all the other herbs that we haven't gone over is all in your handout and your slides. You can contact me at any time. This is mullein. Mullein is amazing, and you'll see it growing along the high dry parts along the side of the road. Right now, it's growing right here in my yard. This is a first-year plant. Can you see how thick and fluffy those leaves are? They make a great poultice. We use mullein leaves. They get really big, this shape. And the fuzziness of it reminds us of the lungs. And it's used very, very extensively for different kinds of dry lung conditions. Through this whole COVID experience, mullein has been on the top of the list for herb blends to be helping people with their breathing. So more to learn about. And I think I'm just going to stop sharing because otherwise I'm just going to want to keep going. And I want to make sure if we have just a minute or two for any questions.
And feel free to unmute yourselves and just ask if that you're more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Or show me your faces. That's always fun too. Hard to talk to blank squares.
yeah. I feel like personally I have a few questions, but I can't quite put them in a question form yet. I kind of need to just go out and try to eat them, harvest them and eat them.
Okay. Yeah. Well, anybody can contact me anytime. My contact information is on the handout and in the slides, and feel free to ever share my stuff, Tiffany, if someone asks.
Sounds good.